Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our first collaboration between SAV and BASE. My name is Tiffany, and I will be your co-host along with my friend here, Deep from BASE. And today we actually have a very exciting first collaboration between these two organizations. SAV stands for Subtle Asian. SAV stands for Subtle Asian Voices, which is actually a weekly YouTube live stream. It's a platform for us to share our Asian American perspectives and experiences around topics related to dating, relationships, mental health. And actually, this is our first segment on our activism topic. So Deep, would you like to introduce yourself and also explain a little bit about BASE?
Hi folks, nice to meet you as well. I'm Deep. I go by they, them, theirs, or any pronouns with respect. And basically, I'm part of BASE, which is short for Black and Asian Solidarity series. It was co-started by Tajane Stoker that I met through a fellowship. We are a recent channel, so we've just been up for the last 5 to 6 months. So around February, March, we started, and we basically talk about Black and Asian issues on a weekly basis as well. Saturday evenings, usually at 7:30 CST. But yeah, that's a little bit about us.
Great. Would you like to also explain our topic for today?
So today we are jumping into Black and Asian intersections. So essentially looking at the engagement between the Black and Asian communities through the sub-themes of relationships and relationships in three forms, whether it's friendships, romantic relationships, or family. And we've got a really cool panelist here, set of panelists here to kind of dive into that. So if folks want to introduce themselves in terms of who you are and your background, we can get started.
Great. If I can also ask actually for you to introduce us with your name, your age, if you'd like to share your location, because we've got a couple of us from around the US, professional background, again, if you're willing to share, your identity, and also your interest in today's topic. Can I pass to Vaidehi to start us off?
Yeah, absolutely. So hi, everyone. My name is Vaidehi. I am 25 years old, and I am from Columbia, South Carolina. I am a health administrator for my day job, but I am also a journalist, author, and mental health advocate on the side. I identify as Indian American. I was born in Canada, but I've lived in the US for the majority of my life. And the reason I really wanted to be here today is because I think being South Asian and, seeing the intersection between people of color, being a person of color, I think being in this space is something that everybody should engage in because, it's a conversation that needs to be had. It's a conversation that not a lot of people have had before us. So I think this is the time and place for it, and I'm happy to really be here. Jalen?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Jalen. I'm also 25. I go by she, they pronouns, either is fine. And I've been born and raised Fort Wayne, Indiana, currently here also. Let's see. What drew me here today is I actually identify as Black and Japanese. So the cultural intersections and solidarity has been just integral to my everyday life and existence. And as an undergrad, I actually wrote a thesis on collaborations and solidarity across nations between Black and Japanese people. So I grew up with an intersection, but I'm always excited to learn other people's experiences because both communities are definitely not a monolith for sure. So I'm just here to learn more and I'm excited. And yeah, I don't know if Corey wants to introduce himself.
Sure, I guess I have to introduce myself now. So hey everyone, my name is Corey. I'm originally from North Carolina, but moved to the Bay Area 5 years ago just because I wanted to work in tech. And I felt like it would be better from North Carolina's races. I knew it would be easier to make it in the Bay Area. Not to say that the Bay Area is not racist, but it was a lot easier to get into my career path there. And I'm happy to be a part of this conversation just to talk about how Blacks and I guess Asians and everyone else, how we all can interact and help make the world better, right? Less racist. So it's just a little bit about me, and excited to be here for the talk. So I guess I'm supposed to call out somebody else to introduce themselves. I don't know. Michael.
Hi, everyone. Also 25. I am from LA. Well, I'm from Inglewood. I don't know if any of you actually like know where that is, but if anyone out there on the live stream know where that is, you know where I'm from, Inglewood. But I live in Long Beach now, so pretty much it's like LA, and like LA County. LA is just so huge that like it just feels like I'm from like a different state. And so I mostly work in like the nonprofit space. I originally started off doing implicit bias training for law enforcement in Beverly Hills, which is like state mandated implicit bias trainings. And then I transitioned my way into working in organizations that prioritize more community-based work, which is currently what I'm doing now. And so the reason why I am here, so I was blessed enough to watch a presentation by Deep about a year ago or so. No, it was not a year ago. Sorry, this pandemic makes me feel like indoors for years now. I think that was actually in like February or something like that. So yes, and it was about the model minority myth. And so I originally was not going to go to that panel, but then I realized that it's better for me to occupy spaces that I'm not necessarily like used to and learn something different that I'm not necessarily used to. And I think that learning ways in which other groups of people have struggled within America has like helped me realize that, you know, all of our struggles might not be the same, but it seems like we're all heading towards the same goal. And so that's pretty much why I'm here. And so I'm really thankful that I was invited.
It's actually a really great segue in today's topic, right? When we talk about intersections, how are we connected and how are we a little bit different? And I think it's really important to have spaces and have opportunities to interact with people who've had different experiences. So I also feel very lucky to have all the panelists here with us today. So before we get started into asking some of the questions and kind of actually digging deep into the topic, I wanted to discuss some housekeeping and logistics on how this panel will work. For some of you, this is the first time that I've met you, so thank you so much for joining us here today. So we will be asking questions alternating between Deep and myself as your co-hosts here today. We'll cover topics around family dynamics or cultural upbringing, peer support groups and childhood experiences, and then also dating and romantic relationships, really tying in both the missions of SAV and BASE, right? And also, while you're answering these questions and while we navigate through the space of sharing and collaboration, really asking you to speak with a very respectful tone and also allow space for sharing and speaking, you know, asking that we just don't speak over each other. And also, even though we're asking you questions from a co-host to panelist perspective, I'd also welcome you to ask questions from a panelist to panelist perspective to really dig deeper if you need a little bit of clarification, and also provide you opportunities for learning as well. So is there anything else that anyone would like to add on to kind of our code of operations and ethics for conduct? No? Great. So we'll just get started. The first question that we have for you today is, can you tell us a bit about your cultural upbringing? What were you taught about other ethnic or racial groups? And we don't have a specific order. If you feel comfortable sharing, just go ahead and we'll try to moderate these questions as they come.
So I guess I'll break the ice on this one. I'm recently, like I mentioned, North Carolina, from a very small town called Goldsboro. That was pretty much like 50% Black, 50% white, but also some Asians there as well. And I mean, I wasn't really taught to respect people based on their race. It was just more around just treating people human. But I will say I started to I guess learn more about other cultures when attending like a 4-year institution, because from elementary school was like the most diverse school that I went to, and then it's somewhat like you see divergent paths, right? Where I mean, I can kind of go a lot into it, but when you see neighborhoods that have lower tax bases, they tend to have the worst schools. And I went to a city school. I lived in a good neighborhood, but I went to a predominantly Black school. So I didn't really have the cultural understanding of other cultures until I went to UNC Chapel Hill. I guess that's a little bit about my upbringing.
Can I probe a little bit more about that? So you mentioned you went to a pretty diverse elementary school, but that you didn't really kind of experience or learn more about other cultures until, college, really, right? Why do you think that is? Because you would think that if you're in a diverse environment, you have the opportunity to learn. Were there obstacles that prevented you from exploring that until college?
I think the scope of my world at that time was just what's in front of me, right? So, and like I'm from the South, so it's like I guess there was a combination of like white plight, I guess you can say. Like literally when I left elementary school, it was just like all Black, high school, all Black, predominantly. But I mean, I would watch and learn history and stuff. Like history is one of my favorite subjects, so I would learn about different things randomly. But as far as like being to say, okay, I have a Indian as a friend, or I have someone who's Chinese as a friend, I didn't really have that until going to college, and when I actually started meeting people from different parts of the world, which was like one of the reasons why I wanted to go to a more diverse university versus just going to a HBCU, because I felt like my life was at HBCU, and I felt like it'd be better for me long term. This is kind of like me thinking ahead, but around like how about I go to a university that has like different cultures there, to where it's going to mimic the work environment or post graduation, right? So
thank you for sharing. Is there another panelist that would like to answer that question? Speaking a little bit about your cultural upbringing, and if you were taught anything specific about other groups.
I can share a little bit. So obviously I come from both cultures. So for me, it was very different. So my mother's side is Japanese, my father's side is Black. I was raised more by my stepdad, who was also Black. So either way, my dad was Black. But I think another nuance is my family, they were a military family originally. My grandfather served in the Air Force in the States. And so for me, it was really weird. So like my mom's Japanese, but grew up in Germany, but then my dad is Black, but I have a Polish last name, some of you might notice. And for me, like culture was so blended in my household, like from the things we eat to the language, where I was just told from infancy, like, there's so many people in this world. People will probably disagree, but my grandmother, I would call her my Sobo or my Babka. She would say, there's like good and bad people. They'll all look different. They'll all come from different cultures, but it's only good and bad people, And obviously the world is not black and white of good or bad people, but the point of what she was saying to me is that, she emphasized from the jump, we need to treat everyone equally, and I would just grow up hearing stories of the military where in base schools where my mother and my family would just be around people of all different kinds of cultures and learn so much from all these different people. So for me, it's always been a little blended culturally. I think the only shock would be when, as I got older, I started to recognize more the nuances of colorism and how people would try to put percentages on me as a mixed race person. I was always told, you are Black, you are Japanese. But when I went out into the world, oh, you're half, you're a fourth, what? And it's just like, no, I was raised that I am this and this. And I was raised to know cultures can go together. Why is the world making this difficult? I don't understand. So that was kind of what marked my adolescence, just the contrast of this radical household. And conservative Indiana, right? In the world. So I guess that's just a glimpse of what I was raised and taught.
Can you actually explain, Jalen, a little bit more about the half term, right? Like how come you feel such a way when people try to put that label on you?
Yeah, it's a good question. And, I really believe the intent isn't bad there. From my experience, when people say, oh, so you're half this, half that, I feel like that just gets into this sketchy territory of like genetics and percentages when really, if we really want to go do ancestry.com, that's not what's going to be reflected there. But I just say, light-skinned Black and Japanese person. And I feel like me personally, I'm marked so much by both cultures. I don't want to put a percentage on anything while I may have ancestry from other cultures. For instance, my last name is Polish, but I don't identify that way. I have no ties to that culture. It's never really impacted my life the same way being Black and Japanese has. So that's kind of, I guess, my personal sentiment there.
Thank you for sharing that. I don't know that I've ever thought of, the term half something else as anything but, like you said, a genetic kind of description. But when you explain it, I mean, even genetically, right, are you really half? But when you think about culture, like it's not such a clear line, right? And even when I think about some Asian Americans, I mean, me being one of them, we all have very different cultures too, depending on, even if we're first generation, right? And that depends on where we went to school, maybe also the messages that we received from our family, and maybe even our desire to want to fit in, right, into like American culture. So that totally makes sense. Thank you for sharing that. Deep, would you like to ask a question now?
Yeah, kind of building off of what Jalen was saying, and this is also open to other folks on the panel. Did you ever struggle understanding your own racial or ethnic identity? So basically, in that struggle, where did you get your support from? How did this affect you? See how other social groups in society function, and anything in between.
Yes. Period. So I'm a first generation American, and just like many first generation Americans, I kind of struggled between like being good enough for like my family, and then also being good enough for like the people that looked like me. That's not necessarily like in my family. So, sometimes it would just feel like I'm not Black enough for the African Americans, but then I'm not Nigerian or Jamaican enough for like my actual family. So it was always just like a really tough kind of like, reality that I have to go through, because like, not not growing up with the same foods as other people, not growing up with the same, language as other people, and all that stuff. It was like really tough. And so, growing up, it wasn't all that easy, but then I really felt like I found my like core group of friends who like really understood what that was like in high school. They were actually like, a lot of them were actually Asian. So like, one of my closest friends is Palestinian, and I have another friend that's a really close friend that's Indian. And so like we all, and then like, once we had like that core group of friends, like more people came in, and all of us were like, for the most part, like first generation Americans. So like we all kind of like really relied on each other. And it was like, and it also helped me kind of like realize, what else is out there in the world, when Michael Brown was shot, they were there for me when that happened. And then, any of the times that Israel was like, bombed Gaza, I was there for them. And I also got to learn about those things as well. So it was like very eye-opening, and it was very, I don't even know what the right word is, but it was just very like welcoming. It was very like welcoming space when we like kind of like all understood each other, even though we all come from different places. And then if it's not something, you know, overseas and someone that, you know, that isn't necessarily us, they know it's family dynamic. We were all able to like really rely on each other with that. And we all kind of like have like that same struggle of like identity of like not being accepted like where you are, and then also not being accepted like where you're from as well.
I
No, yeah.
definitely. Oh,
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
sorry. I was just gonna say, like, I definitely relate to what Michael just said. I don't think I like necessarily struggled with understanding my like racial and ethnic identity, but I definitely questioned it because um definitely like in middle school and in high school even, I was the kid that was always too Indian for everybody. So I'd be the one, you know, listening to Indian music. I'd, you know, be eating Indian food at lunch because my mom packed it. And I was okay with that. I was okay, you know, being Indian. Like I never had an issue with that. But at the same time, when, you know, the people around you, like even your Indian friends per se, are like, you know, listening to pop music and like mainstream like music that everybody else listens to, and they're kind of like, well, why don't you do the same thing as us? It does kind of make you question, like, am I like doing something wrong? Like, am I really that different from everybody? And so honestly, middle school and high school were very tough in that context, because it was sort of that I had my school friends, which were predominantly white and black, and then I had my, I guess, family friends, if you would, which were pretty much all Indian. And so I never really fit in either category, because either way I was too this or too little of this on either side. And so, yeah, looking around, I was like, you know, it did hurt at times, because I was like, am I, you know, genuinely like not a part of any group? Like, is that normal to be that way? Um, and so, yeah.
That's so, I feel like that's very empowering for you, Vedahi, to be able to say, yes, I'm Indian. And you know, you took that on because as I reflect on my own experiences, there were some times where I felt, you know, where I would say, yes, I'm Chinese, but it was never something that I was super proud of. It was just a fact, right? And I would say, you know, it's taken many, many years to grow into, you know, learning about myself and actually being very proud of where I've come from. Because when you grow up in spaces where it's not cool to be different, or, you know, I think maybe that's it for everyone's experience growing up, no matter what color or what you look like or where you're from. No one wants to be different, right? You just kind of just want to be accepted by everyone. And maybe that means fitting in and following the bandwagon. So that's really cool. And I think it's really awesome that you were able to do that at such a young age, because I definitely couldn't. Great. We actually have a question that came in from our live stream. So if you guys are open to answering that question, thank you to Kevin for this question. It is, what is a unique experience that you wish more people outside your race or culture knew about?
I can answer this question. Like, you know, with the whole George Floyd situation, like we as you know, Black people are starting to see like the outpouring of like compassion now. But that's been going on for so long, you know. So for, you know, just to kind of talk more about it, you know, it's like great to see companies kind of tweet, and you know, Netflix is actually putting their money into a Black bank. You know, it's good to see all that, but I don't think people can really understand what it's like to be Black until, you know, you are Black. And the frustrating part is like all of everything we've created, people have benefited from, right? And it's like, I'll keep it clean on this one, but basically everyone wants to be Black until the cops show up, right? Like, you know, you see people take, other cultures take and use the N-word, which I don't necessarily have a problem with. In some instances I do, but, you know, use our culture, rap, you know, SAG, you know, the way we wear our clothes, the way we influence culture. But the minute, you know, we have an initiative, seems like our stuff has been taken to the back seat, right? So I think people holistically, like if you want to like experience and use the spoils of our culture, then like sit down with us and really give us a seat at the table or help us build our own table. So, you know, I think holistically accepting the Black experience versus just, oh, that's a hot rap song, you know, that's Migos, you know, like just because you, and I'm not coming at anybody in particular, but just because you listen to, you know, rap music or whatever, doesn't mean you are for Black people. So, yeah.
That's a very good point, Corey. And I've heard that from other members of the Black community as well. And you did touch on, you know, one thing that people could do, right? Maybe they're not aware that they're doing this. And you're saying, you know, if you're for the culture, give a seat at the table, you know, help us in our, to amplify our voices and our thoughts and needs, right? Are there other recommendations for those on the call on how someone could address that? You know, maybe they do want to help, but they don't know how. And I've seen this even in somewhat like corporate America as well, because I am in that space and environment. People are very nervous to misstep, and so they're very careful about what they do, and they end up, you know, trying to complete a checklist, which doesn't really do anything. And it's sometimes it's a little bit frustrating because I've heard from other friends that identify as Black and colleagues, like they're tired of fighting for their own rights, right? Like they're tired of experiencing things over and over again, and it's time, and it's been time for other groups to also come and join the movement. So, what other things, you know, could we do to support the movement?
I think so. One thing that I kind of realized during like these kind of like protests and all that stuff. One, I realized who my real friends are, like in terms of like who just wants me around just for like, you know, a quick laugh and like, you know, like a cultural reference versus like, but then those same people are like, you know, gone and disappear whenever like I actually have something productive and something of value to actually like input, like in terms of like society and stuff like that. But I think that one thing that really resonated with me is that I used to work at a coffee shop, and one of my former like managers sent me a DM on Instagram, and she pretty much said that that she sent like an email to like the corporate office, pretty much detailing how, and she's white, very white, and she like sent like an email to the corporate office about how like they contribute to gentrification, how they don't hire enough people of color, and how like kind of like the dress code specifically is designed for white cisgender men specifically. And then afterward, then she was like, you know, is there anything that you want me to translate, or is there anything that you want me to send on your behalf there? So it kind of started off as like, here's what I've done. Is there something else that you also want me to do? So it was more like like she took the initiative. Like I didn't have to tell her like, here are the things that you need to do. Like she already like put that labor on herself. And I thought that was very, very important, because like I think that is kind of what is I think this is what like pretty much all people of color are like asking from from white people. It's not necessarily like we want you to do all of it, but we're saying that like we can't come up with all the solutions ourselves. We need you get creative. Like, you know, if you're at a workplace and then there's only like, you know, one person of color there, you know, like talk to your bosses, talk to the people that are higher up there, and you know, heading back to what was said about, you know, cultural appropriation and things that are like knowledge where you get those things from, and that's also like incredibly important. And so, you know, I thinking about the question that was posted on the live stream about, you know, things that, you know, we wish that other cultures would understand and resonate. But for me, like, I feel like I cannot work at a place that is not diverse. Like, if there is no diversity, then that place is not for me. I have worked in places where there's no diversity and it does not end well. So I think that with that, kind of like recognizing to yourself, like even asking the question of like, okay, like if I were not who I am, would this be a workplace I would want to work in? You know, like just thinking about questions like that actually goes a very, very long way.
I can add, just piggybacking off of that, I think, you know, all the things shared already are really good. And I would also say, like, if you're trying to participate in allyship, you know, amplify the work that is led for and by us as well. Like, you know, there's so many initiatives out there for Asian and Black communities. I think a quick internet search, you'll find, you know, people who already laid out the structural things that we have been asking. Like Corey said, this isn't new for us, Asian or Black. There's so many issues that aren't new. And, you know, you don't have to be a mastermind, like Michael said, to like create a whole thing, you know, like go online. There's a lot of org that'll tell you exactly what we want. We've been wanting it for a long time. I'll also just, I guess, offer, I heard a really good quote on an Instagram live. I think her name is Janaea the Great. She was saying we love how we organize. And that just resonated with me because it's like, whether you're an intersectional person like myself or you identify with one thing racially, like we don't live single issue lives. You could be Black with disability, you could be Black and Asian, you could simply be Black. Think about who you love and how you're organizing. Like, how am I including and loving my family and friend circle? So Michael said, you know, like, you know, when different issues happen in his friends community, he shows up and vice versa. That's like, you know, one part, but then like politically, okay, or even just beyond your friends and family circle, just think about, okay, you know, how am I considering people with disability that are also like Black or Asian in my community? How am I considering people who could be both? From my experience, you know, not everyone is, you know, mixed, which is a unique thing I can offer to share, but COVID has been hard. You know, as an Asian identifying person, people were already racist against Asians, nothing new, but then the fact that there is a surge in anti-Asian sentiment at the beginning of COVID saying, you know, what the premise of the Chinese virus, not true, that's not how you label viruses. But even though I don't read Asian, I was so terrified for my Asian appearing mother and grandmother. They look very Asian. And then for it to turn right back around, you know, for just more mass murders of Black people, half of this year was trauma for me, y'all. And I just think we need to think about that. We need to think about, what communities do you love? Like, do you really love them? Are you considering them in everything you do? Are you making it accessible? You know, because we don't live single issue lives. So that's just another piece I would just like to add on to what everyone else already said.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Jalen, for sharing that. There was also a comment here from someone in the chat that agreed with Michael that, you know, working in a diverse workplace is very important. And this person also thanked you for bringing it up.
And thank you also for kind of highlighting how it's affecting you personally, because I think a lot of folks right now, we're trying to look strong for our friends and our family, and especially for our communities, and we're trying to do our best. We're trying to pretend this is normal, but this is not normal, nor should it be normal. And especially with evictions happening nationally, all the way to folks not knowing, will their vote be even counted this election? There's a lot of issues present. I liked what Michael said earlier about like deciding between fake and real friends. I know as a South Asian growing up, I can think of a couple of white friends top of my head who didn't like how my house smelled in terms of smelling like curry or too many spices and stuff like that. And then now, you know, reconnecting with old friends now, I see a lot of them sharing the restaurant experiences and a lot of them in South Asian cuisine. And it's just very interesting, but it's also kind of like, I'm happy you're growing, but I'm also, you know, trying to be careful that I'm not too trusting so that I don't become this performative object. So I wanted to kind of ask the panel too, like when we talk about biases and then also anti-Blackness in the Asian community and beyond, right? This affects us all. Not just like public policy, but personally, what have you found healing? What have you found transformative, and what have you found engaging? Like I appreciated this, I was affirmed by this, but I didn't like this other thing that was happening. Kind of like what Jalen and Michael were talking about just now.
Maybe Deep, you could help rephrase the question.
Yeah, essentially, as we are trying to build cross solidarity, right, between Black and Asian community and beyond, we often think about abstract policies, like we should support this bill or that law, but we ignore the interpersonal aspect of things. So I'm wondering, what do folks feel affirming and respectful and also transformative, that if solidarity is to exist, big picture, what does that look like and feel like for folks on the panel?
Thank you.
I think it's simple. I think basically just being treated like a human being. But then also too, there's a lot of a lot of immigrants who come into the country, and then they kind of, you know, look at us as Black people who've been here. It's like, you know, pick up. Why haven't you gotten farther where you are? Pick up your bootstraps, whatever that term means. But I would say like treating us like a human being, but also understanding the history and the groundwork that was laid that made it actually easier for these immigrant populations to move here. Because I would say those are like the main two things, right? Like really understanding the history, because a lot of things like affirmative action, you know, we as Black people, it was essentially created to help our plight, but more often than not, other populations have actually benefited more from affirmative action, just as an example. So I think really understanding the history, but it's simple. Like, you know, I'm interviewing for new roles, and you know, give me some game. Like, how did you land your role? You know what I'm saying? Like, treat me as if you would treat your family. I think it's that simple. I don't think it's like a complicated, you know, math problem. Just treat us human.
And I would just only add that, you know, it's for building solidarity and affirming spaces. It's not a competition of, you know, who's more oppressed than the other. Because I feel like every time you talk about that, that's when solidarity starts to fall apart. I think just recognizing Black, Asian, whatever culture you come from, you know, if you're POC, you probably got crapped on by someone in history, but it's uncomparable, right? The experiences are completely different. I don't think, you know, you really can compare, but just, you know, spaces like this, I think are very important to just have real and candid conversations of strategizing how we can move forward together, because at the end of the day, like was already said, it's like human rights, you don't want to cut it up in pieces. Like at the end of the day, we all want human and civil rights. We all want to be treated like people and human beings. We're stronger working together, I think, than competing with each other.
One thing that comes to mind to answer that question for you, Deep, and I know I'm kind of like shifting roles as not co-host here, but I think one thing that we should try to keep in mind and do more often is speaking up when we see something that doesn't look right. when we see another group being marginalized, sometimes because the group that's currently, experiencing that, maybe they were taught not to say anything. I know I was taught that when I experienced, overt racism. I was taught to just, move on and not cause trouble. They could also be dangerous to me because sometimes they're strangers that do these things. And so if you do see something, I'm sure you guys have heard this phrase, like, if you see something, say something. That person that you're speaking on behalf of would definitely feel solidarity, right? Would feel that, oh, there's someone that understands what I'm going through and they're able to speak on my behalf. I've heard some stories where, people have really felt supported from those types of experiences. So really do encourage you to say something, even if you're the only one kind of speaking out in a group. That might be a learning experience for that group that's causing that sort of oppression too. Has anyone ever experienced that on the receiving end?
It made me think of an example. I was in a circle of Black friends and family, and then, this was during COVID, and I was gonna order Chinese food. I like to support local Asian and Black businesses just in this time. And, I was with, some Black friends and family, and they're just like, oh, you're about to get Chinese food. I already knew where it was gonna go. And I was like, my heart, I was like, oof. But then, someone else on the call who was Black, wasn't Asian, like, oh, well, like, we need to keep in mind that we need to support Asian businesses too. They're struggling too with discrimination and COVID. And I was like, oh, thank God. Like, it was just like, I don't have to do this so it just took the labor off of me. She didn't have to speak on behalf of my culture or anything. She was just like, well, I've observed this, so I think this isn't a good idea to take the comment away. That's just a specific example that came to mind that was really helpful.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that, Jalen. So we just have a couple more minutes left in our live stream. It's gone by really fast, a couple meaning 15. I wanted to actually pose this question, a couple questions from the live stream chat, if that's okay. Norman asks, should we try to initiate a cultural exchange for schools earlier, exchanging different cultures more directly, kind of like what we're exchanging now, but in a different basis, and what would that look like?
I think absolutely that's a great idea. One thing that I've noticed for a lot of Black and, Asian kids is that a lot of times we're subjected to having to explain the stereotypes that people hold against us, to everybody, and saying, like, for me, for example, like after 9/11 happened, I constantly found myself having to tell people, no, I'm not a terrorist. No, I'm not gonna like burn a building down or something like that. And, I think back then, seeing that I was at a predominantly white elementary school and, kind of being alienated after, that event happened, instead of, that having happened, I really wish there would have been sort of more education as to like, hey, like, no, all brown people, first of all, aren't Muslim. They're not, terrorists. They're not this or that. Like, you have to make that sort of distinction and let people know, like, hey, at the end of the day, these people are human beings. This is, their culture. Talk to kids about it. Like, make them understand that, whatever biases we have, at the end of the day, it leave that behind and focus on the fact that you're a human being. And if we foster that from a very young age, I think growing up, kids are gonna be better off understanding that, yes, there is all these different, backgrounds in our community. But at the end of the day, if we're gonna let that divide us, that's not gonna create a community. That's just gonna create division. So yeah.
I also agree with that. I think that having, you know, like a cultural exchange would also help people within the community understand their community even further, because, you know, we always like people, you know, whoever your people are, aren't monolithic, but even like people within your community, even your own people think that sometimes you're like monolithic. So like even understanding that is, even understanding your own people is very important, because, you know, there are Black and Asian people all over the world. There are Black and Asian people in Africa, in North America, in South America, in Europe, in Australia. Like there's so many, and with that comes different cultures and different thought processes and all that stuff. So I think that it's so crucial to not only understand other people's communities and understand where other people are coming from, but then also understanding like where your own people are coming from. And then by kind of like realizing that together, like as a community, we could also like help uplift each other instead of like tearing each other down in a lot of different ways.
I definitely agree also. And I think it's not only good for like our personal journey, but also people in the other countries, right? Like I know when I was in Japan, even though I'm mixed with both, some people really like the only Black person they ever see in their life was from the Beyonce music video, you know? And it's like, I'm not gonna just sing. I don't sing and dance. Like I'm not doing that for you. But I think the exposure is also helpful for like solidarity across the oceans, right? Across the borders. And I would also, I love what Michael noted there, because I've been in situations where I was with other Black people in Europe and I said, yeah, I'm Black. And they're like, oh, I identify as Dutch. I don't identify as Black. And that just opened the whole door of like, oh, like, you know, Blackness in different continents and countries, like your experience is so radically different. Your history is so radically different. I think that's really cool for our personal journeys too, just to learn where we are in the world and how we can differ even in our own group.
No, and that's very powerful to kind of bring to the table, as many of you mentioned, it's like you've had to be the educator in the space, even though you were in the care of other adults growing up, and they did not do their part, or at least were not trained to handle yourself, to handle your experiences. And it's still a scary statistic, but about 80 to 83% of teachers are still white, many of them being white women. And if I look back to my own, you know, school days, it's that same intersectional demographic. And every time a teacher pulled me aside and said, you know, I don't know why you're doing it like this, but you need to change. I didn't realize that was code for you're not like the other kids and you're not, you know, ascribing to white norms. But she wouldn't be saying that if she knew like my background. So I had to almost explain. This actually kind of segues to a little bit to one of the questions we got on the live stream that Brian posted. Brian mentioned that with all the negativity in the world, especially in the light of this pandemic, what are some of the positive experiences you have all had, or perhaps have kept you inspired and motivated? So if anyone want to share that from the panel.
Yeah, I'm happy to share. So I launched a project called Trap View to provide career coaching for Blacks and Latinos who are looking to break into tech, and basically partner with tech companies to serve as that bridge. Because of COVID, a lot of these tech companies aren't going to HBCUs or even visiting community colleges. I mean, community colleges was completely ignored. But one of the things that's really been promising and things that's really warmed my heart is that most of the mentors that have signed up have been white people. And a lot of the conversations I've had with them is one guy in particular, he was from based in the UK, and he said, you know, I asked him, I was like, so how did you get to where you're going? It's a question I like to ask career coaches just to get an idea of how they made it to where they are, because that directly relates to how they can advise Blacks and Latinos who are looking to break into tech. And this particular person said, you know, I've been privileged. So he's like, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, wow. Like, so having those type of conversations has really been helpful. And there was another question. I know I'm kind of jumping around, but someone asked, is it is it minorities' responsibility to dispel stereotypes? And I say no. Like, you know, if people think what Black people do is what, you know, they see on TV, that's actually not my problem. One of the things that I heard that about racism, right? The racism isn't the problem of the recipient, but the recipient of that racism is the one who gets the brunt of it, right? And it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about, you know, most of the career coaches being white on my platform as of right now, right? So it's up to white people or whoever are the major proponents or supporters of racism to fix it within their own community. It's their responsibility to fix it. It's actually not ours. But at the same time, we have to make sure we're putting ourselves in a position where that racism doesn't stop what we're doing. So in regards to, like, we need to also make sure are empowering ourselves and stuff like that. Like, you know, I see a lot of Asian communities that have little towns like Koreatown, Chinatown. But within it, I can kind of go on and on. But with that said, you know, in history, there's been Black Wall Streets, but they've all been burnt down. So that's the problem with racism, right? When we build ourselves up, we get turned down. So yeah, I hope that answers both of those questions. Thank you.
I think for me, it's definitely like the solidarity. I can't really think like in my lifetime where like I've seen so many people from so many different backgrounds all together, all saying that we need to do something about this system, whether it's the healthcare system because of COVID, this election system because of Trump being an idiot, or like, you know, our criminal justice system. It's just like, this is like I've never seen it in my lifetime, you know, and I wish that it would have come under different circumstances. I wish that Black bodies wouldn't have had to die. I wish that, you know, all the people didn't have to die from COVID. I wish that we didn't have an idiot in the White House. But, you know, seeing that together and you know, us learning from each other, not just, you know, like everyone learning from Black experiences, but then also Black people learning from Latinx experiences and Asian experiences, and people with different abilities who like consistently are being left out of the narrative. You know, it's so important, and I think that that's just really like stood out to me, that that we can all just like come together and find like a common narrative, which is that even though that, you know, all the things that we want to change are different, but at the end of the day, it's still like, you know, like there needs to be like an overhaul of this system, and that there just needs to be more inclusion, and people need to be let in more into the conversation, and people need to be understood more, and it's very, very, very encouraging.
It's a very great, powerful statement, Michael. And I really do feel that having the opportunity to connect with you all today, especially considering I haven't met any of you in person. So really do appreciate your time and your vulnerability, sharing via our platforms and also with our audience. This live stream actually is going to be available for replay at the end of today's call as well. So really do thank you all for your time. We are running out of time here today. I know we could keep talking about this topic for another hour if we had more time. But I wanted to give everyone the opportunity to, you know, say any shout outs or put in any of their social media plugs, and really thank you all and the audience for joining us today. So Vedaheet, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, sure. I just first of all want to thank you and Thiep for having us on today. It's truly been a great experience. I definitely enjoyed hearing all the other perspectives that we got to hear today. For those of you watching, if you want to follow me on social media, my handle on Instagram and Twitter is vgajjar, GAJJAR 95. On both Instagram and Twitter, I talk a lot about mental health, sexual violence, and a lot of other subjects. So if you are appealed to any of those topics, feel free to give me a follow. I would love to have you. Jalen?
Yeah, I'm like tearing up over here. I'm glad it's digital, but these spaces really mean a lot to me. So thank you, Tiffany and Deep, for bringing us together for this. It's a very beautiful space and conversation, and I hope it still happens. And for me, if you want to follow me on social media, I do a lot of mental health, disability, voting rights, and Black and Asian solidarity posts as well. Um, it's Awoken, AWOKEN _Nova, NOVA. I'm usually popping off on Twitter or posting something wholesome on Instagram. Take your pick. Uh, and then if you want to follow Count Us Indiana, I'm doing a lot of voter equity resource and rights work through my nonprofit there. So, feel free to follow either way. And thanks again for everyone watching.
Corey?
Yes. So yeah, first off, yeah, definitely thanks Tiff and Dee for putting this together. I love, being on panel discussions, particularly around like real issues versus just, high pie in the sky stuff. Yeah, so this, yeah, I think we definitely needed to do more of this. Definitely was great, being a part of such a diverse panel discussion, where, we actually have people talking about the issue who are actually from the cultures. I think we need more of that versus, people speaking on issues that they're not a part of that particular community, right? I think we need a mix of both. You want to continue to stay in touch with me. I'm putting all of my socials in the chat. Also, I do have to plug the project that I'm working on, TrapView. As mentioned, it's a career coaching platform to help Blacks and Latinos break into tech. And our goal is to launch our private beta in October. So if you are in tech and have experience and you'd like to actually help bring on the next generation of Blacks and Latinx into tech, feel free to go to the website, talk to me afterwards so that you can become a career coach. It's low commitment. I know people have commitment issues, so I'm just asking for 2 hours a month. But yeah, so that's a little bit about me. And anyone who knows me, they know I always say stay trapping. It's an homage to our culture, but also using it to show positivity versus what it originally meant. So stay trapping with that positivity. And again, holla at me. This was great. This definitely won't be my last time. So take care.
Fantastic.
I won't plug my personal social media just because I mostly post absolutely nothing to do with anything productive at all. But what I will say though is that people in Long Beach or the LA area, there are a lot of mutual aid networks that you can access. So if COVID has hit you, your family particularly difficult, you can't afford groceries or diaper needs, we do have those available in Long Beach. You just have to follow the Instagram DSA, so it's Democratic Socialists of America, Long Beach, and then we have a mutual aid network. So we are, if you need any information on that, make sure you follow that on Twitter, and they'll be able to help you out with that. So yeah, we have groceries, diapers, all those things that you need. So yeah.
Great. And from the SAV perspective, really thank you to everyone again, all of our great panelists. I know an hour is not a lot of time. I think we just like maybe slice the tippy top of all the intricacies that are involved with our identities and our experiences here in America. But this is not the end of this conversation, simply the start. And I really hope that this encourages you to also have these dialogues and conversations outside of this space. I think one of the panelists, Corey, had mentioned about just really identifying and understanding people as people. I think that's very important, especially as you talk about this space. So thank you to all so much for being here. Please like, comment, subscribe to the SAV platform. And then I'll give it away to Deep to close from the base perspective.
Thank you all for coming through as well. Thank you for co-hosting as well, Tiffany. I really appreciate it. And for everyone who shared your experiences and were vulnerable, thank you. That is asking a lot and taking time out of your weekend as well to be here with us and with our audience as well. And I'll just do a quick shout out to BASE as well. BASE is for a Black and Asian Solidarity Series. We're also a YouTube channel that just started recently, and you guys can check us out there. We have Facebook and Insta you can find on our YouTube channel. And then if I personally do social just working workshops. So if folks need any resources, like if you want to read theory, if you want to get connected to folks who are mentors in the field and who are already leading the way, I'm usually kind of the water boy of the situations. I just hand you off to the next person, or I just get you the resource you need. But thank you again for having me also. And it was really an awesome pleasure just to connect with you all again on this panel as well.
Bye, everyone.